Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
And now, as ever, to the papers. If you look at the front page, it really is one story above all. There's the Sunday Borisograph. Boris, how EU wants a superstate as Hitler did. The Sunday Times, Cameron, Dave fears Boris will be the next leader. And in the Daily Mail, Sunday Mail I should say, Farage agrees. I'll back Boris as our Prime Minister. So lots and lots of Boris. And this is a very interesting moment, I think, in this campaign. It seems to be the moment when it often happens during a referendum campaign, when the establishment somehow can lose control of shaping the story. There we have David Cameron saying, I'm going to keep Boris and Michael Gove off the TV. I'm not going to debate with them. Then he gets Farage, who's going to be even more ferocious with him, and so forth. Anyway, lots to talk about. And we're going to start, I think, Julia, with the Sunday Telegraph. Is that right?
Yes, indeed. Of course, Boris Johnson, of course, their big columnist in the Daily Telegraph. Yes, Boris, how EU wants a superstate as Hitler did. As always, the Hitler mentions come thick and fast in Britain, the over politics. But I do find it extraordinary. Again, this is being overplayed. He's saying, you know, the European Union are looking towards a federal superstate. And you know, various people have tried this. Napoleon, Hitler, of course, Hitler is the mention everyone gets. But what he's saying is true.
Much more nuanced than the headlines suggest. I'm not normally one to say Boris is very, very nuanced, but he's very careful. He specifically says, I'm not saying that the EU people are like Hitler. He's saying that again and again and again we tried to have a united Europe, and every single time it's ended in tears.
There was a reason. And also, again, this plays into this whole idea that Remain camp is saying, well, we don't want uncertainty. If you're not sure, if you're a bit worried, vote for what you know, the EU. And the Brexit camp, which I'm certainly strongly in, are saying, you know, they're saying, well, that's all risk. Actually, it's quite the opposite. The risk is staying in. And he's pointing out that, look, the EU as it is not an option. There is no status quo option. The only option is leaving or moving absolutely hurtling down on this train, which is taking us towards a federal superstate, EU army and the like, and total European Union political union.
Meanwhile, as the polls continue not to move very much and politicians start to panic slightly, the language becomes more and more extreme. We had the Prime Minister warning of World War III. Now Boris is using the Hitler word, and of course he knows it's going to be picked up by the headlines. So we have to be very, very careful. Janine, Tories in meltdown as Boris plays it cool. Yes. The Sunday Times has a notably different tone, I think, than the Sunday Telegraph. It's much less clearly Brexit.
That's right. We have Boris here being very nuanced with the Cornish ice cream. The Nation's Press were forced to follow him on a bus to Cornwall this week, so there have been many photo opportunities of Boris with foodstuffs. Yeah.
Yes.
And really this is just a way into, as you can see, a massive spread of back to sort of almost post-referendum personality politics. How can we get past this very irritating policy-led debate and just get straight back into Boris versus Dave and
ice
comedy
creams,
picture?
Pasties,
comedy
bashing.
picture.
Put him on a zip wire and let's see who wins.
Yeah. Now, you're doing BuzzFeed, which young people all use as their main news source. Many young people use BuzzFeed as one of their main news sources these days. It's a very, very different kind of news source. You have lots of lists, you have Britain's favourite avocado and all that kind of thing. But you also have to do the really heavy policy stories. So how do you, as a journalist, sell something like the European debate to younger, less politicised users?
Yes, I mean, we also do sort of, huge amounts of investigative journalism for people, as we call them. However, when you were asking me about young people, and you know, they tend to be very, very interested in things that are relevant to them. In the case of the referendum, we've been focusing on all students who are being driven to register to vote, but in the wrong place. So they're all being pushed through campaigns to register to vote in their university towns, and then when it comes to the referendum, they will be in the wrong place, or in Glastonbury, or not where they've been registered. So we're trying to draw a lot of attention to that and make people realise.
Very interesting. OK, Rohan, looking at face value at the newspaper headlines, it's not a great day for the Prime Minister, who he used to serve, but actually he can turn inside the papers and find something more cheerful, which is the polling.
Well, yeah, that's right. I think there's a suggestion that the Remain campaign may well be further ahead than people perhaps thought. And I think the view in number 10 is that this is going to come down to turnouts. And front page of the Observer, the Electoral Royal Commission is going to be funding a £2.4 million campaign to try and get more people to sign up to vote. About 7.5 million people in the UK right now aren't registered to vote in this coming referendum. And big spread inside the Observer on the focus particularly on young people. If you look at the last election, only about 43% of 18 to 24-year-olds turned out to vote, but over 78% of over 65. So I think there's a view that if the youngsters, if the BuzzFeed readers and others can turn out to vote, that'll make a big difference.
Trouble with this is the Jeremy Corbyn style of campaigning, and how's that working so far?
Well, I think if young people do turn out to vote, it probably will make a difference here, because youngsters are more likely to back Remain.
Right. I have some news from the Prime Minister so far. He's been watching the programme and he says he didn't warn about World War III.
Oh, he
It's all
did.
misunderstood.
Oh, he absolutely did. He knew perfectly well that was what the headlines would be.
Take it. Okay. All right, Juliet. Now, so are we going to carry on with this story for a bit longer, or are we going to move on?
I think there are other stories.
There are other
extraordinarily.
stories,
I mean, it
strangely
is
in the
amazing.
papers.
That I don't know where they are, but of course, it's fascinating. We've had so much about schools in the last week. We've had SATs exams and stress, and the father who went to the High Court. This is a fascinating story here. Parents step up cheating for places at best schools. Almost 200 parents were last year caught trying to cheat to get their children into good state schools. I personally salute those parents. They're wonderful parents. I think it's absolutely absurd in this day and age that you can't just send your kid to the local comprehensive and it be a good school, and the fact that people feel they need to pretend, lie about where they live and goodness knows what to try and get their child into a decent
So
state school.
you're in solidarity with the riggers and the wire
Well,
pullers?
because the idea, if you happen to be lucky enough to have your home somewhere where there is a decent state school, lucky you, but sod the kids of the parents who aren't. No one should be put in this position.
So what about the other kind of fixing the system? What about this guy who's taken his kids out of school to go on holidays and taken it to the High Court, and we had headlines saying anyone can now take their children out of school to go on holiday?
Absolutely absurd. We brought these rules in to protect children. This dad seems to think he knows an awful lot better than everyone else, John Platt. He was saying, well, his daughter's got very good regular attendance at school. 90% attendance she had. 4 weeks a year of schooling she missed. My daughter's been at school for 5 years. She's missed 4 days, all for illness. I think the arrogance of some parents who think that teaching their children the rules don't apply to us is rather worrying.
Do the rest of you agree?
I come from a long line of school teachers, all people with proper jobs in my family, and they would be horrified at the idea that you had a day off for any reason whatsoever, let alone 4. They think you're
It's one form of compulsion that most people seem to be in favour of, isn't it? Let's move on to another huge political story, which is, of course, Eurovision.
I can't believe it's taken us this long.
I know.
The voting,
We all wanted to lead on that, by the way.
The voting, the polls, they made the European referendum like nothing. And, of course, in the end, Ukraine beat off Russia with a song which is all about troops pouring into somebody's house and killing all their family. Let's have a little look at the song.
And strangers are coming, they come to your house, they kill you all and say we're not guilty, not guilty.
Not exactly uplifting, is it?
It's a terrible
It's
song.
quite important not to laugh.
No, it was a terrible song. I voted Spain.
You voted for Spain.
The Daily Mail has managed to find a sort of a lining for Britain, who obviously we didn't do too well. Every song except one was sung in English, so at least we've got that going for us.
Yeah.
And was that
If you've
song,
got a
the Austrian
BuzzFeed
song that was
story,
sung in
Janine.
French?
Yes, well, we obviously covered this extensively, but one of the things that we did was find this brilliant picture.
This is great. I love this. Make
Which-
Eurovision gayer again.
Make Eurovision gay again, because obviously it is in doubt. And I did notice several tweets last night, people claiming that the Ukraine victory was the gay men across Europe sticking it to Russia.
And that isn't actually Donald Trump's hat. It just looks like Donald
No,
Trump's
it ought
hat.
to be Donald
There
Trump's
are,
hat, I think.
there are
If you think
various versions of this one around. There's a brilliant one which says "Make America Great British Again," which
Absolutely.
Quite nice.
No, what was interesting actually was until the very last vote, Australia were winning by absolute, head start. And there were some tweets going around last night saying, look, leave European Union. We can't even win the Eurovision Song Contest. We're so rubbish. It's just, the
Several
whole of Europe
suggested.
can't win it.
if there's a Brexit, there could be an Oz entry. A lot of that.
Now, before we finish, there's a real proper old-fashioned story in the Sunday Times about Nelson Mandela, saying the CIA tipped off the South African authorities
Right.
before he was arrested.
Truly fascinating story in journalism. 1962, Nelson Mandela on the run. How was he caught? And a CIA agent, a former CIA agent, has claimed that it was the CIA that tipped him off, fearing communist intrusion into South Africa. It was the CIA that handed him over or tipped off the authorities.
Great.
If that is true, it really changes, I think, people's view of this historical moment and America's relationship with South Africa during the Cold War.
The outcomes today will be very interesting between Pretoria and Washington in due course, whether
Absolutely.
Trump's there or not. Meanwhile, back home with the BBC, Janine, you've chosen a story saying the BBC says it is too Christian and must diversify.
Well, really, I mean, I feel for you,
Christian at
Andrew.
all.
No, I mean, the
I
thing
don't
is,
feel
we've
that.
only just agreed the charter, haven't we, for the next 11 years? And
Well,
if we're
we'll
going
see.
to start again already on the lobbying and the interest groups, then I think we're all going to lose the will to live. So I'd just like to appeal to every possible interest group to just dial it down for a couple of years, and we will all listen to your thoughts again about bias. I don't know, somewhere around, what, 2017, 18?
Okay, we'll go
yeah,
with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Fair point. Now, Rohan, we started by talking about, of course, the great European debate story, and there is one other story we haven't mentioned, which is Sajid Javid, the business secretary, who explains why, although he describes himself as a Eurosceptic, a great enemy of the euro, hostile to the European superstate, he has changed his mind because of the single market issue, which we have discussed endlessly on this show.
I thought this was a really interesting op-ed from Sajid Javid online on the Telegraph website. He's talking about why he came around to vote Remain and back Remain. And I think he's also, in a sense, signalling a next phase of the Remain campaign. This week we're going to see a lot of business leaders, more business leaders coming out in favour of Remain. So I think they're going to really dial up to 11 the business arguments that there's been there throughout. They've been talking about the economic risks, the economic benefits, but the voice of business arguably perhaps hasn't even been as present as it might have been. And Sajid is signalling that's what's about to start.
And Julia, as a Brexiter, is that, as it sense, what you fear? Brexit has, I would have thought most people would think, won on the issue of migration and perhaps on the technical issues about sovereignty and the European Court.
Yes.
But
Yes,
on
if
the
you-
economy,
if you
the
care
other
about
side...
democracy and accountability, Brexit wins, let's be honest. No,
On
on the
the other
economic
side,
side, the
we're talking
Remain
about-
has been very strong. But again, Sajid Javid is supporting Remain for his political career. And well, we know that. We know perfectly well he's a Brexiter, really, as an awful lot of the cabinet ministers are. But again, we know that big business loves the European Union because they can just lobby one body. The point is that 95% of businesses in Britain are small businesses who have no business whatsoever with the European
including
Union.
the man to your left.
Well,
What do the entrepreneurs think?
Well, I think, in fairness, I think a lot of entrepreneurs aren't yet really engaging, which is why the
They've got
voter turnout.
lives.
They've got lives, right? It is striking, I think, that the Remain campaign have been very, very focused and I think pretty disciplined, talking about economic risks and benefits. The Leave campaign, strategically, I think, have worked through a number of different arguments on immigration, on sovereignty, as well as the economy. Time will tell which approach is more effective.
Remain don't want to mention immigration, an extra 1.3 million people living in the country we didn't know about. I mean, best not to mention that, eh?
Well, very, very interesting.
I've been getting away with it all